Welcome to this series, The Foundational Questions of Our Time, brought to you by Synergy Circles of the Evolutionary Leaders, specifically the Integral and Holistic Cosmology Synergy Circle and the Cornerstone Synergy Circle. These discussions feature global thought leaders dialoguing with renowned author Riane Eisler on how their transformational work relates to Dr. Eisler's four cornerstones of how we transform cultures from domination consciousness to partnership consciousness, crucial for these challenging times. I'm Dr. Kurt Johnson of Light on Light Publications and Media. Each video will engage Dr. Eisler in a discussion with a global thought leader introduced immediately after this initial introduction of Riane Eisler. Riane Eisler, JD, PhD, is a best-selling author, systems scientist, futurist, cultural historian, and attorney, whose work shows how to build a more equitable, sustainable, and less violent world. Her famous book, The Chalice and the Blade, Our History, Our Future, is now in 57 U.S. printings and 30 foreign editions. Dr. Eisler is president of the Center for Partnership Systems, CPS, and editor-in-chief of the Interdisciplinary Journal of Partnership Studies at the University of Minnesota. She is also the author of Nurturing Our Humanity, How Domination and Partnership Structure Our Brains, Lives, and Future, co-authored with anthropologist Dr. Douglas Fry, Oxford University Press, 2019. And The Real Wealth of Nations, Creating a Caring Economics, hailed by Nobel Peace Laureate Archbishop Desmond Tutu as the template for the better world that we are so urgently seeking. In short, according to dictionaries, a domination hierarchy is a social hierarchy arising when interaction of members of a social system creates a ranking system. Such rankings of who are favored can involve gender, race, economic status, and so on. Dr. Eisler's four cornerstones of how we shift from domination consciousness to partnership consciousness are these, and we invite you to hear our first video with Dr. Eisler in which she elaborates these four elements. The first cornerstone is childhood. The second cornerstone is the attitude toward gender. The third cornerstone is economics, and the fourth cornerstone is story and language. So let's go over now to introduce our guest for this episode. So welcome. In this episode, we feature Diane Marie Williams, founder of the Source of Synergy Foundation and co-founder of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle. As we point again toward the 2023 Igniting the Holo Movement event and the Holo Movement book, both of which are important activities of the Evolutionary Leaders. Previously in episode 4, we welcomed the Reverend Deborah Moldau, director of the Evolutionary Leaders, and she engaged with Dr. Eisler with regard to the mission and purpose of both the Evolutionary Leaders and Dr. Eisler's four cornerstones of how our world can shift from systems of dominance to systems of partnership. So we hope you'll enjoy that episode, and you can find out much more about all of these activities at evolutionaryleaders.net and holomovement.org. That's HOLO movement.org. So Diane will continue that conversation. And then in episode 6, we'll be joined by Emmanuel Kunzelman, the lead editor of the book, The Holo Movement, Embracing Our Collective Purpose to Unite Humanity. So these will continue these important conversations about these focused activities for transformative change that appear to be going on all around the world. and they are all completely relevant to the goal of Dr. Eisler's four cornerstones, moving from domination to partnership consciousness. Riane's chapter in the Holo Movement book is precisely entitled The Human Transformation from Dominance to Partnership, the Four Cornerstones. So let me now further introduce Diane before we turn the discussion over to them. Diane Marie Williams is the founder and president of the Source of Synergy Foundation, a nonprofit organization that creates opportunities for synergistic engagement among individuals, organizations, networks, and communities, so that together they can have a greater transformative effect on the whole. Ms. Williams was the co-initiator with Deepak Chopra of one of its main projects, the Evolutionary Leaders Circle, that aims to inspire, support, and serve conscious evolution. In 2004, Diane initiated the formation of the United Nations NGO Committee on Spirituality, Values, and Global Concerns, CSVGC, at the United Nations in New York, where she served as its first chairperson. And she also served as co-chair and co-founder of this committee at the United Nations in Geneva, where it was originated in 2002. She is one of the contributing authors to the Gold Nautilus Award-winning book, Our Moment of Choice, Evolutionary Visions and Hope for the Future. And she is the recipient of the Spirit of the United Nations Award, the Golden Rule Award, the PMAC Peace Award, and has been acknowledged by the Emily Fund for a Better World as one of the heroes for a better world. So welcome to Diane and Riane, and I'm going to pass the baton now to Riane Eisler to welcome Diane, and then Diane can initiate their conversation.
It's really a pleasure to be with you here, Diane. Welcome.
Well, I'm truly delighted to be here, and many thanks to you, Riane, for all of the work that you've done and continue to do to empower us to apply partnership principles and consciousness in our families, communities, workplace, and governments. And much thanks to Kurt Johnson from Light on Light Media and to the members of the Integral and Holistic Cosmologies and Cornerstones Evolutionary Leaders Synergy Circles for inviting me to join this important series, The Foundational Questions of Our Time. I have been following this series and have enjoyed listening to all of the engaging conversations and look forward to exploring the first cornerstone on childhood with you. So just a little bit about our work. Your vision for a world as a partnership society really closely parallels the work of the Source of Synergy Foundation, which is based on creating opportunities for synergy that lead to partnerships. And our Evolutionary Leaders Circle is one example, and we are truly delighted and honored to have you as a member, Riane. And we're also so fortunate to have Deborah Moldau as the director of this project, as Kurt just mentioned, and Kurt himself as our Synergy Circles coordinator. Both of them have contributed significantly to countless flourishing initiatives and partnerships, and we're truly grateful to them. So later on in the program, I'd like to share some ways members of our Evolutionary Leaders Circle are also activating the first cornerstone on childhood, including our beloved Deepak Chopra, Gary Zukav, Bruce Lipton, and others, and how this is contributing to building a far-reaching partnership consciousness around the world. And the Source of Synergy Foundation has another key initiative. It's a blossoming evolutionary partners network made up of organizations and businesses currently, right now, with members of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle and soon other organizations around the world that wish to fully embrace this partnership consciousness. And of course, as Deborah and Emmanuel, I know he will share soon in their conversations with you, that we are joining in partnership with Purpose Earth, Light on Light, Spiritual Life TV channel, the Academy for Future Science, and countless others on igniting the Holo movement, which, as you know, is a movement based on synergy, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And we feel this movement can offer humanity hope, and that we can and will return to the essence of wholeness, and that we have all that we need to turn things around through actualizing both our inherent oneness and a unitive evolutionary process that leads us forward. And partnership is really our focus, because we know as a community that our collective mission is to inspire and ignite humanity to want to live into its true nature, which is part of an interconnected wholeness of the cosmos. And I really appreciate the profound message that you have been sharing during these conversations, in your books, and through your Center for Partnership Studies, that the original direction of humanity's evolution was partnership, and that warfare and different forms of sexism are neither divinely nor biologically ordained. And as you shared in your books, there is a vast archaeological evidence and new discoveries that are reinterpreting humanity's past. For example, the fact that there are a number of Neolithic cultural sites that proves in those times humanity engaged in peaceful social organization. But unfortunately, human potential has been stunted for hundreds of years in dominator societies that have used or still use oppression, mind conditioning, and force to maintain their rigid social hierarchies. So I think one of the fundamental questions of our time is, what can we each do on a personal and collective level to move consciousness towards partnership, so that all communities and social systems of the world will be based on life-affirming values, such as higher consciousness, compassion, nourishing creativity, using our innate powers like our intuition, as in the goddess worshiping cultures that harness their wisdom and power to nourish and create healthy communities alongside men in their community. And we know that the continuation of successful ancient partnerships models that emphasizes the linking of humanity and partnerships, including between men and women, and others that don't really feel that they fall in either gender category, as well as with nature, is essential to our very survival as a species. So in terms of what we can each do on a personal and collective level, I think it would be interesting to explore today how we can support the further activation of cornerstone number 1 on childhood, as it's truly humanity's moment of choice, and what we and future generations do now and in the coming few decades will determine whether we make it here on planet Earth or we move a step closer to the 6th mass extinction. So I'd like to ask you, Riane, if you can please share a bit about the first cornerstone, childhood, and why the first years of a child's life is so significant. And the second part of this question is, you wrote a book on nourishing our humanity, how domination and partnerships shape our brains, our lives, and our futures. What are some concrete ways we can nourish the creativity, wisdom, innate powers, and higher consciousness of children in their early years, so that they will participate in creating healthy communities that embrace life-affirming values?
Well, I thank you, first of all, for sharing all of this information, Diane. And I will start with the first part of your question. In Nurturing Our Humanity, which came out in 2019, that book really draws very heavily from what we know today from neuroscience. And the first thing that it shows is that the old argument between nature and nurture is really a red herring. It's a distraction. So many things we are taught are distractions, and I'll get back to that perhaps, because the reality is that even genetic predispositions are either expressed or inhibited depending on the interaction of our genes with our environment, which for humans, of course, is largely our cultural environment. And using the partnership domination scale introduced by my work, if that environment orients to either end of that scale, you get very, very different brain structures, and with it, how we feel, how we think, how we act, including how we vote. And I think that, in a sense, I'll start interjecting a little bit about what you said about what can we do. The first step, and this is really inherent, isn't it, in the synergy movement, in the evolution, and in the work of the evolutionary leaders, is consciousness. Because action stems from changes in consciousness. I mean, I sometimes say it as a joke that when I get really depressed about the state of our planet, I think of the European Middle Ages. And why? Because that was really only a few hundred years ago, and it really looked a lot like the Taliban, you know, with the Inquisition, the Crusades, witch burnings, women and children, forget it, no rights whatsoever. And even the whole concept of human rights, it was something that, you know, what? I mean, are you crazy? You know, so we have moved forward. But, and this takes me to the four cornerstones, of which childhood is the first one. Progressive social movements have not paid enough attention to the four cornerstones, to the foundations on which regression after regression to the domination side of the cultural continuum has kept rebuilding itself. And so that, and they're all interconnected. And yes, childhood is primary. However, it is completely interconnected with the second cornerstone, which is gender. I mean, we live, as you mentioned, in a society in which ranking rather than linking is the primary operational principle still, although we've moved towards the partnership side in some parts of the globe at least. But it doesn't have to be that way. And we don't have to have what I call a hidden system of gendered values in which anything coded feminine, like caring for children, nutrition of children, a nurturing of children, educating children, is somehow considered secondary to anything coded, quote, masculine in domination systems, which have very rigid stereotypes, gender stereotypes. And of course, this translates into an economic system in which there somehow isn't enough money for caring for children, for providing them with healthy food, with a good education, right? I mean, and of course, the fourth cornerstone is story language. So if we start talking about becoming conscious that just as the old stories about, you know, nurture and nature, you know, and this false argument is a distraction, so are the conventional social categories of right, left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western, Northern, Southern. There have been really terrible, oppressive, violent regimes in every one of these categories. So none of them tell us what we need to build, right? Which is very different from these inclusive categories of the partnership and the domination system. But also, if you really think about it, and we have been conditioned not to think about it, nothing less than the majority of humanity is marginalized in these conventional categories, women and children. So let's start with what would our world be like if we had an economic system in which caring, this quote feminine activity, and especially caring for children, were primary. And if we start with that, we have a completely different perspective, different consciousness.
Absolutely. And I was just thinking about what you said, how we really have moved forward from the European Middle Ages. And I heard something the other day, and I thought about you because it was something that brought me a lot of hope. Because Kate Middleton, who was married to Prince William of England, and by that marriage entered into the British royal family, which has a lineage of kings and queens ruling their subjects, has made early childhood development a focus of her work. And she's launching something called Shaping Up, which is a new campaign aimed at raising public awareness about the importance of the first 5 years of a child's life. So I was really delighted to hear that. And I just wanted to read you a quote that she said, because it so parallels your work. She said, "The way we develop through our experiences, relationships, and surroundings during our early childhood fundamentally shapes our whole lives. It affects everything from our ability to form relationships and thrive at work to our mental and physical well-being as adults, and the way we parent our own children. These are the most preventative years. By focusing our collective time, energy, and resources to build a supportive, nurturing world around the youngest members of our society and those caring for them, we can make a huge difference to the health and happiness of generations to come. During this time, we lay the foundation and building blocks for life. It is when we learn to understand ourselves, we understand others and understand the world in which we live. This is why it is essential to not only understand the unique importance of our earliest years, but to know that we can all do something to help raise future generations of happy, healthy adults." So that's a truly positive development, I think.
It is indeed. And I want to add again, because I'm a systems person that looks at how can we really bring about whole systems change, that actually caring for children as a priority. And I'm delighted that Kate Middleton has launched this, and it is part of the changing consciousness, really, because children, well, I always think of how it is possible, really, for us to have been so brainwashed, that we think that hitting a child is a good pedagogy. And yet, if you do surveys internationally, a majority of people still believe that spanking is a good pedagogy. And spanking is only really sort of, the tip of the iceberg, because there are, as you know, so many other forms of violence against children and of abuse of children, which conditions people to be punitive. We really have to take a whole systems approach, and gender is essential here, because as long as we code our caring for children as the quote inferior, feminine, we're not going to take care of children. I mean, we can talk about it, but it comes with also raising the status of women, and because it goes along with raising the status of the quote feminine. And I say quote because, again, the good news, and I like to focus not only on the bad news, like we're constantly bombarded by, with this terrible motto in journalism schools that if it bleeds, it leads. I mean, think about that. I mean, that's pathological, isn't it? And yet that's what's taught, just as people are still taught that caring for children, caring for the sick, caring for the elderly, and yes, caring for a natural life support system is just reproductive work. And that's reproduced by nothing less than the metrics that we use, GDP and GNP, which consider them externalities, so that, think about it for a moment, what the results of this are it's really fantastic that a tree on which we depend, children, adults, everyone, for breath, is only part of the GDP or GNP when it's dead, when it's a log that can be traded. So this is why I emphasize so much looking at the connections. And I want to say that I think that we see a lot of trends, but they're not connected by people. And I think the first thing, and really this is something essential, and it is very much what you are working on, this synergistic approach, is to look at how the various cornerstones and the various elements in our cultural environments connect. So consider that Putin, who we know, I mean, he's being, he really is a war criminal. But war is criminal, so here we are. But he, in 2018, substantially lowered the penalty for family violence, so that if you hurt or kill a member of your family, a child, a woman, a man, it is less than if you hurt or kill a stranger. And why? Because Putin recognizes the connection between an authoritarian, rigidly male-dominated, highly punitive and violent family, and the fact that this is foundational to the kind of state that he wants to impose, an authoritarian, rigidly male-dominated, highly punitive and violent state and world. So we are really in an existential struggle right now, but it isn't between right and left or between capitalism and socialism. It's between the people pushing us back who get it. I mean, why do the Taliban and Hitler and Khomeini and Stalin and Putin all focus on these, quote, social issues of the four cornerstones? So we need a partnership movement. And I'm so grateful that through people like Kurt and like you, Diane, that is becoming really integral to the movement of the evolutionary leaders, because you are about systems thinking, about an awareness of our interconnection. That is systems thinking. So brava.
Thank you. And I was just thinking when you were saying that, we also need a partnership with parenting and children.
Absolutely.
And now it's Deepak was really, as Kurt said, was instrumental in starting the Evolutionary Leaders Circle. And the catalyst was really to bring social change makers together to partner more closely and together accelerate this shift in consciousness that you're talking about. And Deepak wrote a book on 7 spiritual laws of parenting, where he expressed, if you want your child to lead a fulfilling and successful life, the best route is through spiritual parenting. And he truly believes that spiritual parenting will support the child in learning the value of their own inner world. And as the years pass, this value increases until the realization dawns on on them that all of existence originates in here within at the level of the soul. And he talks about before the age of 10 or so, he feels that spiritual parenting will have the most lasting effect if it builds a foundation in the self rather than focusing on like principles. And he stresses that every child should feel that they're loved and lovable, they are worthwhile in their parents' eyes. Being a good person comes from within. Happiness and fulfillment are natural. And also that one of the most essential things parents can do is to support a child's inner values by modeling good values. So seeing parents who are fair and kind literally trains the child's brain in that direction. And he stresses that lifelong values are not instilled through, like you were saying, negative lessons and punishment. What a child takes away from these experiences is really guilt and shame and resentment. And the same is true if parents instill fear and doubt by telling children such things as life is unfair. If you don't look out for number one, no one else will. And if you want anything in the world, you have to fight for it. We know that children remember, absorb, and often model the emotional tone of family life, right? I mean, we all absorb that. And Riane, you speak so often of the importance of nurturing, and Deepak also aligns with this and feels that the deepest nurturing you can give your child is spiritual nurturing. And he mentions 7 simple sayings that he feels can have a profound impact on a child's life. So I'll just let you know what they are, so all the parents out there can also hear. Everything is possible is 1. 2, if you want to get something, give something. 3 is when you make a choice, you change the future. 4 is don't say no, go with the flow, which is cute. 5 is every time you wish or want, you plant a seed. The next one is enjoy the journey. And the last one is you are here for a reason. And if children are raised with these insights, every child can obtain the success that comes from having the most valuable skills anybody could possess, the ability to love and have compassion, and the capacity to feel joy and spread it to others. And also Gary Zukav, another member of our Evolutionary Leaders Circle, has a similar philosophy. He believes that parenting is a partnership, and that parenting with authentic power means accepting that true power is not synonymous with control. That, as you say, Riane, we do not acquire power through dominance, but rather by being in touch with our inner selves and fostering relationships built on trust, cooperation, and harmony. And Gary really stresses that parenting with authentic power means drawing our instincts to create a balance of power. So parent-child relationships work best when mutual respect reigns and when children know that their opinions count, and they're more likely to come to their parents when something is bothering them. And we know that research really suggests that children raised in families where negotiation is a common practice are better behaved and have better relationships with their parents. And negotiation can be a powerful tool for resolving family conflict or any other type of conflict in other relationships. So I have another question for you, Riane. What advice can you give all the parents and caregivers listening in that wish to raise their children in an environment where children can feel that they are respected and valued as true partners within their family?
Well, I'll back up for a moment, and the fact that there are now these kinds of resources, as you mentioned, is very much of a partnership trend. It's part of the movement from domination to partnership. And we at the Center for Partnership Systems, and we did change our name, by the way, from Center for Partnership Studies, because we're much more action-oriented, really, to Center for Partnership Systems. We have some wonderful resources, very bite-sized, very short for people. One thing, and I'll be happy to give Kurt perhaps the URLs for each one of them so that they can be part of the presentation, so people can, because you can download them for free. One of them is the Caring and Connected Parenting Guide. And it is based, it's very short, it's available for free in both English and Spanish. And we'd love to have it translated into many languages. It's based on the latest neuroscience. And yes, of course, it's nonviolent. And it's called the Caring and Connected Parenting Guide, because we know that children need to have some sense of safety of connection. And I here want to say something, because I will get to another wonderful resource that we have for people, again, bite-sized, short, because I think people sometimes need to have an entry point, and then they can go on to longer resources. But the thing that's happening really is that the research, as you say, shows what happens in domination systems. Maybe they don't call it domination systems because the research is very fragmented. It focuses on family, as if somehow families didn't, as if they arose spontaneously out of no place. Well, families are embedded in different cultures and subcultures, for goodness sakes. And the research shows that in domination-oriented families, caring is really connected with coercion. And of course, force then becomes in. And what do kids learn? They learn that force, violence, is not only okay when used to impose your will on others, but it is moral. I mean, we have to really get to some of the real points here of what are we dealing with. Why do so many people worldwide accept this? Because it was done to them, it was done to their parents, it was done in the course of domination history. This became a practice. So another resource that we have is, and there are lots of resources, by the way, on our website, which is centerforpartnership.org. But there's an article. We have a journal. It is published at the University of Minnesota. Again, it's online, it's peer-reviewed, and it's free. And there's a wonderful article by a family counselor, Dr. Julie Dasvedo-Hanks. And it is called Bringing Partnership Home, a Model of Family Transformation. And I highly recommend this article. And I'm so glad you're asking me these questions, because yes, consciousness is wonderful and essential, but then we need to translate it into action. And for that, we need we need access to the research. We need access to the people who, as you mentioned, some of them are working in this area. If you have older children, I'm going to suggest something that may sound, because, our brains develop at a certain point, to really be able to absorb more and more information, to be able to use it, etc. We have developed a partnership technology toolkit with a grant from the Ford Foundation. And while it was, the grant was to develop, well, the grant actually was to bring together leaders from the technology field to move to really examine what in the heck are we using technology for? Because, as you said, it's a question of values, isn't it? I mean, if you value certain things consciously or unconsciously, it'll be part of the programming. But that technology, the Partnership Technology Toolkit, has 9 questions that are adaptable to any situation. And I would love to see it used in parenting, actually, of older children. Intrigue them to really look at some of these questions that we ask. What are your assumptions about human nature? As kids grow up, they start asking questions. Well, the first thing is to become conscious of what you have been taught and what you consciously or unconsciously hold. Then the second thing is to really know your neuroscience, which is part of the toolkit, which shows, for example, that the so-called pleasure centers of our brains light up more when we share and care than when we win or dominate. I mean, and all of this is in nurturing our humanity, but it's also part of the toolkit. So these are 3 resources that I can offer people, and at this point, they're free. We also have courses at the Center for Partnership Systems. We have a course that I really invite people to take, which is Changing Our Story, Changing Our Lives. And it has 4 videos with tons of visuals in them. I speak at in the videos, and they start with where we are, how did we get here. I mean, really, the 3rd video, in a sense, prefigures a lot of what's in nurturing our humanity, the neuroscience. And the 4th video is actually based on the 4 cornerstones. So I can highly recommend that too. But we have to act now. We have to join together. And this is what you're doing. And I am so really delighted that you are looking at these 4 cornerstones, because frankly, they're foundational.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing all of those valuable resources, toolkits, courses. I'm very impressed. And just maybe to share one more work of one of our evolutionary leaders, you were mentioning domination becomes a practice because it's what we experience. And Dr. Bruce Lipton, one of the members of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle, his work also closely parallels your own. And I know Deborah mentioned him as well when she spoke. And he says that children under 7 are in a theta brain state, which is a state of imagination. And theta is also hypnosis. So children in particular are programmed, as you were saying, by watching and listening to other people like their parents or their teachers or their siblings who have also been through this system, the system that they're about to go through. And the children's life also becomes an expression of their behavior, and that 95% of our life comes from those programs in the subconscious. And all of us have pretty much been programmed in the same way. For instance, when we're about 4 or 5, we're sitting at a desk with an authority figure in front of us, our teacher, telling us what we can do, when we can speak, eat, leave, even go to the bathroom, you know. And I remember I had an amazing kindergarten teacher who really encouraged us to be free, to take our shoes off, to take a nap when we were tired, pretty much like the Montessori school, but it was a different school. And then in 1st grade, I had another teacher that was very stern. And I remember one day I took my shoes off in class like I was used to in Mrs. Stone's class in kindergarten. And she got very angry at me and told me I was a lazy girl. And I lost my voice for a few years, actually. I hardly said anything in school at all. So I just understand this concept so well, that life is really an expression of our programs. And but we can rewrite our program. So
that is so basic. It takes a lot of consciousness and then a lot of action and effort, but we can change our consciousness, and transformation is possible. And that really, I mean, if we had time, I would tell you about the many transformations in my life. Really. I mean, I'll tell you one story, which is sort of funny. I'm also, as part of my background, I went to the UCLA Law School and I became an attorney. And at that time, I thought that it would be fun to be an entertainment attorney. So I got myself a part-time job somehow, as an entertainment law firm in Beverly Hills. And one day, the head honcho called me into his office, and he wanted to compliment me. It was actually in connection with Rachel Welch's divorce, where I did some research and I did some work on it. She recently died, but so she came to mind. And he said to me, you don't think like a woman. And he meant it as a compliment. And you know what? I took it as a compliment instead of as a terrible insult. I mean, we have all been conditioned. And when I woke up, as if from a long drug sleep, in the late 60s, along with thousands of other women, and realized that, hey, I don't fit in, but it isn't me. It's a social problem. It's a cultural problem. Look, I share it with all of these other women. It was a real aha moment, So we all need to have these aha moments. And that is really what this is all about, isn't it? About leaving our comfort zones, the programming, and looking at because we don't want to throw out, so to speak, the baby with the bathwater. Look at what's sound and look at what is really preparing us to function in a domination-oriented society. And then try to move towards the partnership side. And if we can just start with childhood, we can save so much time and effort.
Absolutely. So I guess my last two questions for you, I know we're just running out of time. What, in your opinion, is the quickest way to prevent or reverse the programming we received in our early years so that we can lead more authentic lives? And if you could create an educational system, what would it look like?
Wow. And I have 5 minutes to answer that.
Okay, we're getting 10.
I don't think it's going to be quick. I know we're running out of time. And certainly we need to act quickly, but it's going to take some time. And frankly, with some people who have been so damaged, like take a Trump, who said it's all about domination, right? For him, there are only two alternatives. You either dominate or you're dominated. There is no partnership alternative. And I really have to take a sidebar here for just a moment. A domination system, of course, is a pyramid. There are hierarchies of domination, but there are also hierarchies in partnership systems. I mean, we need parents, we need teachers, we need managers, we need leaders, but it's a completely different type of hierarchy. And I had to invent words. I call it a hierarchy of actualization, where power, my first book drawing from these, what are now almost 40 years of interdisciplinary, cross-cultural, transhistorical study, was The Chalice and the Blade, which is still an evergreen. It's now in 56 US printings, or 57, and it's in about 30 foreign editions. But on the cover of it, it says The Chalice and the Blade. And people mistakenly think that they're symbols of feminine and masculine, but they're not, because we know that men can be caring. My deceased husband was a very, very caring man, David Loy, a brilliant man, and a caring man at the same time. And we all know that there are women who are not caring, who become leaders, who use the domination hierarchy approach. What I'm trying to say is that we need new language. We need new words. which haven't been provided, but we can all be part of the process of transformation as long as we really leave our comfort zones and start thinking in terms of the partnership domination biocultural lens. Because it is biocultural. I mean, we've covered this, that, biology and culture are not in two different planets. They're right here. So I don't have a quick answer for your questions, but I do know that how did socialism become so widespread? It really was at an era when people still read a lot. And these social media are a way, again, of fragmenting our consciousness. I mean, it doesn't have to be. The internet can be used in many wonderful ways and is used in wonderful ways. But we really have, and that's why we did the technology, by the way, the Partnership Technology Toolkit, because it's so important how technology is programmed. I think every one of us can be part of the process of transformation, but I'm afraid I don't have an easy answer in handy tablet form, so to speak. Every one of us will find our way, but what I really suggest is immerse yourself in a different paradigm, a whole systems paradigm that understands that as human beings, we actually, given the possibility of doing so by our culture, and given rewards for that rather than punishing us for that, we will opt to care and share rather than to win and dominate.
Thank you so much. Yes, we'll definitely find our way through a new partnership paradigm. I have 100% faith in that. And thank you, Riane, for sharing your wisdom, your light, your tenacity, your deep caring, and for giving us hope that partnership consciousness will prevail. I just feel so hopeful after this conversation. And thank you so very much for all of your profound work. Blessings to you.
Thank you. And thank Kurt. And I want to thank really the synergistic work that you're doing is fundamental. And it's such a huge part of what is needed, which is based on changing values, and looking at what have we really internalized and what is just out there, so to speak, for window dressing. But thank you, Diane, and thank you, Kurt. Bless you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Riane Eisler, and to our viewers. Each of the subsequent videos in this important video series will feature global thought leaders and activists discussing their work in the context of the Four Cornerstones with Dr. Eisler. And you can update yourself regularly on the series at the websites that will be posted just hereafter. And these include lightonlight.us, centerforpartnership.org, evolutionaryleaders.net, and the Sacred Stories channel at YouTube. That's YouTube at the Sacred Stories channel. Thank you for joining us, and please tell your colleagues about this important video series. This is Dr. Kurt Johnson of Light on Light Media and of the Synergy Circles of the Evolutionary Leaders, a project of the Source of Synergy Foundation. And please also see our emerging work at holomovement.org. That's HOLO movement.org.